Everyone, this is Dr. Kristy Taylor, founder of WORxK Solutions and creator of the WORxK Principle. And I'm so excited to bring you season 2 of the WORxK Solutions Podcast. So in this episode of the podcast, you'll be hearing from me, but I am so excited to interview a series of great guests over the next few months who will be sharing their thoughts on behavior, agility, and leadership in the workplace. And I wanted to start by grounding us in a concept that sits at the heart of everything that we do at WORxK Solutions, and that is behavior agility. And this episode 1, is going to focus a little bit on what is behavior agility and the WORxK Principle, because this conversation is really shaping in terms of how I created this framework and focus on this area of behavior agility to help individuals and organizations really understand how beliefs, emotions, and behavior shape workplace experiences. And if you are familiar with my work, in terms of my one-on-one coaching, I always focus on mindset with my clients. So it's not just about the workplace experiences, but it's how we as individuals, how our beliefs and our emotions shape the outcome of our experience. So this episode is not about the trends or the quick fixes. We'll get into that in future episodes, but this is about how people actually show up at work, how they respond under pressure, and how intentional behavior becomes a competitive and cultural advantage in modern workplaces. So I'm so excited for this season of the WORxK Solution Podcast and all of the awesome guests that we are going to have as we really focus in on this topic. Now, before we jump in, if this is your first time listening to the WORxK Solution Podcast, or you're not familiar with my work, I wanted to take a moment to explain a little about me and who I am and the areas where I focus. I am a PARWCC certified career coach, meaning that I am certified through the Professional Association of Resume Writers and Career Coaches. I'm very passionate about the work that I do. I have 20 years experience in HR and education, the founder of WORxK Solutions, creator of the WORxK Principle, certified disc coach, and a member of several professional organizations. And the thing is, across my career, one pattern has really consistently shown up, and that is that as a coach, I understand technical skills matter, credentials matter, and systems matter. But when organizations and individuals struggle, the root cause is rarely the technical issues alone. It's the behavioral, right? And so if we're working in this space of training and development, we know that we can teach people about the skills, right? But we really want to focus on, if you're familiar with the Kirkpatrick model, that behavior change to create a sustainable impact. So to create sustainable change, we have to focus on behavior. And that is why I created the WORxK Principle, because it lives in how people think, communicate, react, and make meaning under stress. And so this realization is really what led to my focus on this area. So that's a little bit about me. Again, I'm excited to be, back for another season of our podcast. And then finally, I want to jump into a little about WORxK Solutions, because we have continued to evolve over the years. Now, WORxK Solutions, we help mission-driven professionals and organizations grow through behavior-focused coaching and training. And our work is powered by the WORxK Principle. And at the helm of that, of course, is myself and my colleagues who really support this mission. What is the WORxK Principle? You'll be hearing about it today. We'll talk about it over the next 10 episodes or so of the podcast with all of the awesome guests that we have coming in. But just in a sense that we focus on 5 core pillars. And this is the work towards goals, open communication, resilience building, excellence in performance. And my goal is that to create sustainable work is to help you to keep growing. Okay. And so what really makes our approach different is that we do not start with surface level behavior alone. Again, if you want to make impactful change, whether it's yourself as an individual or throughout your organization, you really have to understand the root cause of that. And if you are, again, familiar with the work that we do, we focus on utilizing rational emotive behavior therapy approaches as the foundation of what we do, because without addressing what people think and feel, sustainable change it doesn't happen. So if you haven't gotten a copy of my book already, the WORxK Principle and the WORxK Principle Primer, there are 2 components to this. The WORxK Principle Primer is the kind of the introduction, and I'm working on a more in-depth book on this research, as well as the WORxK Principle, our workbook, Both of those are available on Amazon. I'm sure we'll have a QR code up here somewhere, but check it out. All of those things are on Amazon as well as available on our website. And we post an abundance of articles, we curate workshops, all based on this concept of behavior agility. So I'm going to jump right into this podcast. It's not meant to be long, but I just wanted to introduce this concept so you're kind of familiar with what we are really focusing on in this season. Behavior agility, it is the ability to adjust your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions with intention. And the phrase with intention really matters because what you think really matters, right? We don't often realize like how this actually impacts our thoughts, impact our outcome, because your thoughts leads to behavior and the behaviors leads to the outcome that you often get. Behavior agility is not about just reacting faster. It's about pausing long enough to choose how you respond. And during change, stress, or uncertainty, most people, they default to their automatic behavior. So, I love these different personality tests that I often have the joy of administrating. And one of the things that we really say, like when I do the DISC assessment or other different assessments that I use with clients or during training, I always say there's always going to be a dominant area, right? But we have to learn to flex our behavior so that we can respond differently to different situations as they arise. And so we need to always, if we're growing in leadership, consistently examining ourselves. And that might be taking a look at things like, are we defensive? Do we avoid? Are we over controlling? Or do we withdraw? How do we respond to various situations? And behavior agility really helps to interrupt that pattern and help us to build a sense of self-awareness and really begin to work toward that process of improving. But it's not just about improving those things that we want to get better at. It's also when different situations arise, how do we respond? How do we adapt? Do we seek to understand the perspectives of other people? Behavior agility really supports clearer communication, better decision-making, and stronger collaboration. And that is what we're all about here at WORxK Solutions, okay? It helps individuals respond with awareness rather than defaulting, again, to that automatic behavior, because we're all a little bit of something. So, and this is really critical when it comes to behavior agility, because it's not just that personal skill. It is when we can do it at a personal level, it becomes an organizational asset, because when enough individuals within a system, they can strengthen their behavior agility, we can cause an entire culture to shift. Think about this from a sense of awareness as a leader, right? And the impact that all of this could have. Okay. So why have I really begun to shift my focus over the last few years on this ideology of behavior agility or behavior of diversity in the workplace? Well, the organization that I founded is called WORxK, right? And I'm looking for solutions that help people to really land and do well in the workplace. And this includes how, even when I'm doing career coaching, I'm working with clients to teach them, like, hey, if we're talking about a pivot, making career pivots, and your framework and your state of mind, what does it really look like in terms of you moving into that next role? And from a leadership perspective, what does it look like with you really holistically understanding how your behavior impacts your team and the outcomes of the organization? So as leaders, we play different roles. And I also want to point out to you that even in your everyday life, you play different roles. You're always adapting your behavior. So even though this particular podcast, we're focusing on the workplace, there is so much that you can take away from this in terms of how you adapt your behavior so to various situations and manage your mindset. Work environments today, they are constantly shifting and they are increasingly complex. And organizations are navigating change and big ambiguity, competing priorities, and emotional strain at levels that we did not see a generation ago, right? Things have really changed. Years ago when I was growing up, it was kind of go to college, get a good job, stay there for 30 years. So this workforce is changing, because today's generation, they're going to stay in a job on average, 2 to 3 years at most, and then they're going to move on to the next thing. They are shifting because the work environment is shifting. Many of the challenges organizations face today are not technical problems waiting for technical solutions. Yes, those things are there. People right now are trying to figure out, how do I adopt the AI? Or how can I leverage tools and resources to improve efficiency? But a lot of the changes that we as leaders, my argument to you, there's not just about those technical changes. Again, if you're working in the training and development or organizational development space, you know that in order to create long-term sustainable change, we really have to focus on behavior. So I can develop a training. That was a great article that I read years ago, and it was training is not the answer. And I think that I've kind of responded to that in so many ways, because the first thing that typically a leader will think of when they're leading initiatives in the organizations that we have to provide training. That is true. And then we'll run assessments, needs assessments to try to fill a skills gap. But long term, I can teach basic skills, right? But if we want long-term sustainable change within our organizations, we really have to focus on behavior changes. And that starts with the individual, and then it leaks into the organizational culture. Now, so again, it's not just the technical solutions. It is about addressing behavior challenges. Thoughts, emotions, communication patterns, and reactions, they shape workplace outcome every day. Under stress and uncertainty, people default to habits. So if you are a leader and you are experiencing or have been tasked to lead a change initiative, I challenge you to think about that. You're going to experience people who are resisting. Why are they resisting, right? And they don't want to get out of that place of comfortability. And I would say, even yourself, have you ever resisted change or not wanted to push through with something as a leader? That, again, sometimes as leaders, we get tasked with these responsibilities of leading initiatives that we don't necessarily want to lead. But when we look at the impact that we make or our attitude towards leading that initiative, how does that impact our team? So I would say to embrace the initiative or the project, or if you know that you need to make a transition with something, we have to embrace that wholeheartedly, because our team is looking for us to lead the people. And if you don't have the positive attitude, right, that's kind of going to seep to them. But sometimes you can have the positive attitude as a leader and kind of take the charge of leading, and you're still going to be dealing with resistance. That is because people are in a place of comfortability and they don't necessarily want to change. And so this is why we have to focus on behavior outcomes. Is it going to be always 100% in terms of this? No. And this is why we go through the process of decatastrophization, where we have structure, rules, and expectations within the organization, so that people are very clear. Some things you're going to have to get on board with, or you're going to have to find your next position, because this is the change that's taking place. And so that is why we have those structures within the organization. When we talk about how our thoughts, emotions, communication patterns, and shape reactions, again, we have to look at the resistance being under the banner of avoidance, defensiveness, people wanting to be in control, or just tapped out to the point where they're disengaged. And so that is why behavior agility helps to interrupt that, because from a leadership standpoint, it is teaching you, how do I adapt my behavior style, from a self-awareness standpoint, to make sure that my team is supported. So at its core, behavior agility is human, because at a human level, people want to feel understood, supported. They want to feel capable. Understand this, that beliefs influence emotional reactions. And emotional reactions influence how people communicate, how they interpret information, and respond to one another. So when we are tasked with leading change or helping to motivate a team, or whatever it is that we are managing, whether it's our day-to-day tasks in our own household, right? We have to have that sense of awareness of how do we approach this from the standpoint of making sure that people feel supported, they feel included, and they get what they need, so that we can get what we need. When individuals develop this self-awareness of their internal thought processes, so again, I'm taking it back to us as leaders or individuals in the workplace, creating that sense of individual awareness, understanding how it impacts the team. Because when you do this and you understand your internal thought process, you're going to increase trust. There's a greater accountability with you, and alignment improves. And so when you're dealing with people who are quote unquote resistance to change, they are somewhere in that place of avoidance, defensiveness, over control, or disengagement. And so we need to tap into that. But we also need to be very clear from a leadership standpoint that this is the direction that we're moving. Getting their input, their buy-in, having them to be a part of the process can really help with that. Intentional responses create safer, more productive environments. And so having your own inner sense of self-awareness and being able to adapt to the situation is going to help you, because you're going to be able to foster a relationship or dynamic with the individual that you can engage them, or the expectations are just clear. This is how we're going to move forward. But it's going to keep you from having an emotional response to a situation, and to quickly just focus on adapting your behavior so that you can better support and lead your team. Now, when we look at the cognitive foundation for behavior agility, again, within the framework that we use here at WORxK Solutions, or I, Dr. Kristy Taylor, if you contact me for training, what is my approach? I focus on rational emotive behavior therapy, but it's a cognitive model. And this is where cognition becomes central, because sustainable change is going to require examining underlying thoughts and assumptions. And so this is where, when we talk about cognitive, the cognitive model's perspective, this is going to help you to really understand and hone in. Again, I specialize in a particular cognitive model. May not work for everybody, but I try to introduce different concepts and techniques when I'm working with clients so that they can go with what works best for them. Because again, when we're talking about a workplace environment, new policies alone, they're not going to change behavior. So we can talk about decapitalization, okay, and trying to really put in structure that's going to help to mitigate some of the behavior or resistance to change. But we know whether it's just training alone or the implementation of policy alone, that is not necessarily, it's going to be very surface level. Training gives a sense of awareness, but behavior changes is what creates the sustainability. And so how do you foster a culture where we begin to change behavior? What I'm presenting to you in this argument or perspective is that it begins with leaders in terms of how we self-assess and how we take personal accountability for the change initiatives that we're leading, along with all of those other things of training, designing, sustainable training programs, but understanding and recognizing our sphere of influence. Now, because we understand that beliefs influence emotions influence communication and action, leaders who understand those cognitive foundations that I'm talking about through the WORxK Solutions, through the WORxK Principle, and the work that we do through here at WORxK Solutions, they really become equipped to guide teams through complexity and the stress of change. And again, this is where behavior agility now becomes a leadership competency versus just an idea. And so I want to just quickly point out, what is rational emotive behavior therapy? Because again, when we talk about a cognitive model, I'm looking at the totality of their various cognitive models, but I love rational emotive behavior therapy techniques because it provides a practical framework for understanding beliefs and behaviors. This is what I kind of got into a few years ago, and some of the framework that I've written through my research. And even when I focused on, diversity and inclusiveness, which we adapted our framework from because of the evolution of DEI, this was really the foundation, because it wasn't so much about the setting up of the programs themselves. It was more so about being able to lead people through these difficult conversations and change. And I kind of felt like, with the research that I was looking at the time, is that when you're able to apply these cognitive model principles, and you are in a position where you have a level of self-awareness as a leader and you're navigating people through change, it is going to create a much easier dynamic to really push people to where, push this change and motivate people to get where we need to go. I don't want to say push people, but motivate people. Again, it is a combination of that decapitalization process where we're putting structure, rules, and expectations in place for the organization. We're providing training, but we want to get to that next level of that, like that Kirkpatrick model, where we are really focusing on behavior and sustainable behavior change. And if you've heard this through the Kotter's 8-step approach, all of this is kind of aligned the same. But what I try to get away from the language from is when, again, we're doing psychological personality assessments of people just saying, I'm just this one way. And this is one of the reasons why I've decided to specialize in the DISC Flex, because it really focuses on that ideology of behavioral adaptability. And I am also working with nonprofits in colleges to teach students about, here's the thing with seeking your first job or transitioning to the workplace. It's not just about the hard and soft skills. You have to know how to pivot, adapt, and have that behavior flexibility so that you can respond to situations based on the best approach, based on maybe who you're talking to, or to ensure that you are approaching this in alignment with the organization. It's not just about what you think, right? Or how you feel about the situation, but you are being consciously aware enough to understand how to strategically respond. Okay, so with that in mind, when we talk about rational emotive behavior therapy approaches, this cognitive model, this is a framework that we specialize here at WORxK Solutions, because REBT helps individuals identify the inaccurate or unhelpful thinking patterns. So when you're looking at this from a one-on-one standpoint, what I challenge you to do as a leader is to really kind of take a deep dive. If I'm approaching something and I'm thinking about it one way and I'm thinking about it in a negative way, why am it's kind of like the 5 whys, right? Do a deep dive and continue to ask yourself the 5 whys so that you can actually understand the root cause of why you're thinking that way. And I'll also challenge you as a leader to, as you're thinking to that root cause, also understand, kind of do a vertical 5 why of who, what, when, and where, in terms of if I don't take accountability for my thought process, or if I don't rein in some of the things that's impacting my organizational culture, what is the impact? And so when you look at the WORxK Principle Primer and the workbook that we use for the purposes of this, what I would say to you is the exercises that we have in those workbooks really walk you through that process to help you to better understand this type of alignment. Also, although REBT originated in clinical settings, its principles really translate naturally into the workplace because of how it really focuses on helping people to identify inaccurate or unhelpful thinking patterns and reducing emotional reactivity, because that's the key, and supports more intentional behavior choices. Look at this as from an individual level as well as from an organizational cultural standpoint, because it starts at the individual level, but seeps into organizational culture, because ultimately when you have reoccurring patterns within your organization, that is part of the culture of the organization. And so as I'm bringing in guests over the next few months, and we're talking about these ideologies when it comes to organizational leadership, the adapting, this is, again, what I encourage you to kind of take a deep dive and examine in terms of look at the culture of your organization and how maybe a lack of behavioral flexibility or allowing systemic things to kind of continue to fester without addressing them directly is impacting your organizational culture. All right. So we looked at the REBT framework. Or REBT, this cognitive model that kind of is used here at WORxK Solutions in terms of layers. But then I just want to briefly, again, touch point on the actual principle itself and what I try to focus in on when I'm talking to people about behavior, utilizing a behavior-based framework. All right. So again, the WORxK Principle is a behavior-based framework. It's grounded in REBT principles we just talked about. It builds on behavior agility and support workplace excellence through those 5 interconnected pillars. I just used the name of the organization. If you want to know a little bit about how we got to the name, my doctorate is in health science. I've always worked in this space in health ed, and and a long time ago, I really focused just on healthcare. So you see that RX, it means prescription, right? But I transitioned to we had a prescription for change within organization, because I found that the work that we were doing is applicable to any organization. And so this is the framework, again, that I came up with and that I really try to focus on in terms of how in the structure that I use to work with organizations. So the first pillar is work towards goals. It really emphasizes working with purposeful action And then we'll go into this a little bit more. And then open communication, resilience building, excellence in performance. And then when we talk about creating that sustainable change, keep growing. So a little bit more in depth for each of these. Okay. First of all, the work towards goals. Again, I pointed out that it emphasizes purposeful action, individuals that helping them to identify what they hope to accomplish, examining beliefs and that hinder progress, and adopting behaviors that support consistent movement towards desired outcomes. So I want you to look at this as I'm focusing on how I work with my individual clients and during career and executive coaching sessions, but from a big picture organizational standpoint, because having clear goals is going to help to reduce frustration and increase motivation. And so coming in to work with organizations, really understanding about where they are now, where they want to go. And that process will start with an assessment, right? And we will assess what is being done and addressing each of these areas, where the organization is now and where do we want to go. And if you check out the WORxK Principle primer, there is a mini assessment already included in that document that you can kind of take to kind of see where you are individually as well as your organization. Now, the second component of that is open communication. It focuses on how individuals express themselves, interpret information, and engage in dialogue. And so because communication is influenced by internal beliefs and emotions, I utilize this RABT-informed strategies to promote active listening, self-assessment, respectful expression, curiosity, and mindful engagement, even when we're managing conflict. Again, certified in several areas, and to include assessments focused on conflict resolution, walking people through the DISC assessment. And so we really do focus in on improving this approach with organizations. I am really big on the individual accountability as well as the impact that it has on organizations. All right. The third component of the WORxK model is resilience building, because resilience supports emotional regulation. And so if you haven't caught on by now, it really is all about self-assessment, using it as a foundation for emotional regulation, and really understanding how your mindset leads to behavior that really the behavior is a results in the outcomes. And so that's at an individual and an organizational level. When we talk about resilience building, this is focused on emotional regulation and cognitive flexibility. And through that process, individuals learn to recognize the trigger. So when we go back to the rational motor behavior therapeutic approach or techniques, I'm really, what are the things that trigger your behaviors or your belief? And then that helps to serve as a foundation to shift unhelpful interpretations. Now, in an organization, we look at that, we facilitate that process through dialogue, getting people to open up, meaning that we have to create a safe space for people to open up and really share, what is impacting your thought process or level of resistance to change within the organization. And then we've, through that facilitation process, focus on restoring balance during stressful moments or such as navigating change. And this directly influences adaptability, problem solving, and sustained performance. Because by getting people to be more accountable or self-aware in terms of, hey, why am I resisting or thinking in this way? Maybe a person doesn't feel that they are listened to or that they're a value member of the team. All of those things impact your team's morale and ability to move forward and navigate through a change. But through the process of effective facilitation and really getting those conversations or really seeking to understand that narrative, we can move them out of that defensive mode or that resistance mode and at least put some structure in place to help them feel more a part of the team, some accountability pieces so that we can get the behavior change that we need to move the team forward. Now, after that is the excellence in performance. So that is the fourth pillar of the WORxK Principle, and it focuses on connection between thought patterns, accountability, and follow through. So this is all kind of a part of this process of creating sustainable change through behavior agility. Because again, once I can understand the foundation of that resistance, whether it's in my own mind or what's happening with my team, it really helps to open that door. We can put a plan and put solutions in place to create that sustainable change. and again to begin to navigate that process. Because when individuals examine how beliefs shape work quality and consistency, it's going to strengthen their reliability, responsibility, and effectiveness. Because the biggest thing here is that we want people to feel like they are engaged, part of the team, and begin to become the champion of that change. We don't want people to feel like if they're part of our team that their buy-in or perspective is not important. Okay, we want that dynamic to exist there, and sometimes that takes a little bit of coaching, a little bit of structure, and just conversations, hard conversations, right, to get this process going. The last portion of this is keep growing, because again, behavior agility is about creating sustainable change, and so for us, that just means keep growing. This final pillar reinforces continuous learning and reflection. It's not just a one-time process. Growth requires learning new behaviors and unlearning patterns that no longer serve one's individual's goals, and individuals challenge their outdated assumptions. So from a perspective of you as a leader, if you went through this process one time, so if you purchased the book or you did exercises in the workbook and you went through this process one time, you maybe use the workbook to address a specific issue. But what I challenge you is to be in a constant state of continuous learning and growing. The same thing with your team. There should always be conversations about what is happening, working through projects. One of the things when I was leading, I would bring in my team whenever they had new ideas, and I said, okay, we're going to present this to the board of directors. Here's what we need to do, right? And we would sit and we would ask questions. I would ask a lot of questions and engage them in the process. Okay, this is your idea. This is, I think, okay, this is what would help to move it forward. Now, let's engage in some dialogue in terms of what could be the resistance here in terms of implementing this idea, because I wanted them to know that I had their back with everything that we did if it was something that was aligned with the strategic direction that we were going as an organization. Because ultimately, if we were going to present this to a board, I would not be the final decision maker. My job was to be able to support and engage them and lead this change initiative. And so those types of conversations in terms of what would be the resistance here, how do we navigate this process as a team, those are all important. And then sometimes from a leadership perspective, you are in charge of making a decision. And when you're making those decisions, you have to move things forward. And sometimes you can't always get the team's input. It is the history that you have with that team in terms of will they trust your decision-making and ability to lead forward. So always be in a reflective state. Encourage that with your team, because the WORxK principle itself encourages individuals to examine their beliefs that shape their behavior, identify the internal barriers, and adopt healthier patterns to support success. And that is really all, and it just sometimes it takes those conversations in terms of situational behavior agility. Okay, is in terms of how all of this is going to show up in real time. You're going to be able to see the results through that ideology or concept of situational behavior agility, because you're going to see your team. You are going to be individually constantly assessing and thinking in real time. You're going to see your team members being more strategic about how they think and respond to situations. And it's going to be less of an emotional response and more of a strategic response because of this level of consciousness that they have as a result of focusing on behavior agility. It's the ability when it comes to situational behavior adaptation. This is going to be that ability, again, to adapt your thoughts, communications, and actions based on the immediate demands of a situation. But it's not just that. It's not just about a person choosing to respond emotionally. It's also how do I respond in terms of getting able to get that task done. How am I going to adapt my behavior? Because maybe I'm one of those people who I like to have a checklist, right? I actually am one of those people. I like to have a checklist and I like to be able to think things through. But then there are some times when some things require a rapid response. And so if I'm not able to work on that timeline, how do I quickly adapt my behavior so that we can get this done, right? In terms of with my team. And so those are also things that are important for situational behavior agility. Not sometimes it's task response, because we have to be able to make a decision and move things forward. Now, understanding these things is going to help in terms of, it's going to apply during conflict, feedback, collaboration, decision-making, being able to move a task along. But as a career coach, these are things that I really feel like when we talk about the dynamic in today's work environment and this competitive workforce, that we should also not only be focusing on from the broader aspect of how we're running our organizations, but also how we are training up the next generation of individuals and leaders who are coming into the workplace. So when I'm working with colleges or nonprofits, these are the things that I focus on, being able to teach graduates, as well as when I go into an organization from a top-down perspective. These are the things that I'm looking at when we're trying to create and foster an environment for sustainable long-term growth and behavior adaptability. And so as a part of our framework, I just want to point out is that our beliefs, they shape how we think. How we think shapes what we do. What we do shapes what we experience. And so this principle that we're going to be talking about over the next few months really teaches that mindset that drives behavior. Behavior drives outcomes, and behavior agility does not stand alone. It actually really begins with what we believe. Because again, many organizations, they try to change behavior first by enforcing the policies, rules, and training. And I'm absolutely saying that you do need all of this in place. But if you don't address the beliefs and the internal dialogue that is influencing those behaviors without first shifting a mindset, you're only creating temporary change. Okay. Now, as an organization, are we here to be a therapist? I use therapeutic approaches, but because you know that you're going to experience some resistance, this is why those policies, rules, and training becomes important. But if I want to create that sustainable change, that is why I am also focused on shifting that mindset to at least help people to understand that in order to lead within this organization, or in order to be successful on this team, this is the mindset that you need to have, right? At least in this, the perimeter of where you work. And that is also a part of behavior flexibility and accountability, because without that structure, we're going to see a breakdown. And so you're going to see this over and over again. If I'm doing a presentation or a training, no matter where I'm at, this is what I kind of talk about. This is where my research is really centered on, that mindset, behavior, and outcomes. Okay. So mindset really focuses on the beliefs, assumptions, and internal narratives that influence actions. Behavior is the visible choices, communication style, and the habits displayed at work, and outcomes. It's the performance, culture, and results that follow. So behavior agility is at the center of this triad. So I like to show this triad that we use because when it comes to the WORxK principle, it bridges the gap between aligning your mindset, behavior, and the outcomes. Your mindset leads to the behaviors that influences that, and those behaviors are going to get you the outcomes. Okay, so what you think leads to how you behave, and that gets you the results that you have. And so whether that is at an individual, personal level, or if for example, you're leading an organization, that is the impact that you're going to, based on the culture within an organization that is accepted, based on that organizational culture, that is the level of behavior that you're going to get, resulting in the outcome. So if you're experiencing all of this resistance when it comes to change, I'm encouraging you to, we have the individual level mindset, behavior, outcomes. And then again, when we look at organizational culture, what's the mindset of the organization? That mindset is a result of the behaviors, leads to the behaviors, and that leads to the outcome. That is my entire point there. When leaders and teams, they develop behavior agility, they don't just react, they respond with intention, creating healthier relationships, improved communication, and culture where excellence becomes sustainable. All right. So so now that you have a better understanding of what we're doing, where my focus is, and the work that I've really put into this process, I want to make sure that you know that you can learn more about this concept through our book, the WORxK Principle Primer. Again, the WORxK Principle Primer, an agility framework for transforming mindset and performance, is all available on Amazon. The other piece of it is there is a workbook to accompany the WORxK Principle Primer. And so I want you to feel free to purchase that workbook, and as well as you can purchase the ebook. All of this is available. It introduces the framework, explores the beliefs, behaviors, and workplace effectiveness model. It's designed for individuals, leaders, and organizations. So hopefully you heard me go a little bit through that as I recorded this episode of the podcast. and it serves as the foundation for focus on behavior-focused development. And so I'm really excited for season 2 of the podcast and all of these awesome concepts that we're going to be introducing. And I look forward to the awesome guests and things that we'll be talking about this time. So be sure to tune in every other Thursday at 1 p.m. So this is episode 1, but we are kicking off with episode 2 that will immediately follow. Be sure to check us out on WORxSolutions.com. And if you're interested in having us to host an event for you, check out our catalog, reach out to us, and we look forward to engaging with you.